So we have started. Thank you all for coming, and this is great. This meeting has been organized by the Bristol Democratic Committee. I'm the town chair, Linda Andrews. Mark Gibson is the vice chair. You want to wave, Mark? Okay. Matt Daler, I don't believe is on. He's the treasurer. Christine Homer, you want to just raise your hand? Can you see her? I don't. Okay. And she's the secretary. As Sally Roth is a committee member and Debbie Ramsdale is a committee member. So as you know, somebody just got not sure what's happening. Liz Sayers in, but I'm not sure why I'm seeing. What do I do here? Oh, there we go. Are you Liz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, somehow you knocked my picture off. I'm not sure why. Let's see. Mark, can you help me on this?
We're good. We're good.
Oh, there we good. Okay, great.
Everything. Yeah, it's
Everyone's
fine from over here.
Okay. As you know, the proposed merger of the Mount Abe Union School District and I'm going to call it the Virgins Northwest Unified School District is on the ballot for November 8th. And since this is such an important decision, whether to merge the districts or not, the Bristol Democratic Committee wants everyone to be well informed. And we want Bristol residents to hear all the arguments for and against this merger. We originally wanted to have a panel of those pro and against the merger, followed by questions and answers. However, instead, there will be separate meetings for you to attend. The Merger Study Committee will be conducting 2 forums and 1 informational meeting, followed by questions and answers. They will present their study on the merger, which recommends the districts should merge. Therefore, to ensure that the opposition has a full voice, the Democratic Committee has invited Nancy Cornell to give a 20-minute presentation on the reasons to not merge. This will be followed by 40 minutes of discussion. NEAT TV is live streaming and recording this presentation so that the information can meet a larger audience. So let me introduce Nancy Cornell. She was an associate superintendent of schools, curriculum coordinator for 16 years in the Addison Northeast Supervisory Union, which is now the Mount Abe Supervisory District. She'd worked with teachers and principals on all 6 of the 5 town schools. She focused on curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional development, personalized learning program development, and grant administration. She was a member of the Robinson Elementary School in Starksboro and a board member of the Addison Northeast Supervisory Union. She was formerly an English teacher.
I'm in a meeting. You and Daddy.
I want something to put my programming things.
You want to mute?
Yeah, I got on mute.
Okay, thank you. And a freelance writer. So we are so pleased she has accepted to come tonight. And I also want to acknowledge and please some of the Merger Study Committee are with us tonight. Kevin Hansen is with us. Krista, I don't see Krista. Did Krista, are you?
This is not actually part of the merging committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm on the school board, but not the Merger Study Committee.
Thank you. And Liz Sayer, and she's on the study committee. Is that correct, Liz? Yes, she's someone. Yes. Can you hear me, Liz?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So so we want to welcome all of you, and we're welcoming all the views during this discussion because we want to all get well informed. So I'm now turning the meeting over to Mark Gibson, who will be the moderator, and Christine Homer will be watching the time, the raised hands, and the chat room. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize we really is supposed to be educational for the for and against and the unknown. I think to ask questions and really and discuss. So enough of that. Let's just carry on. So we're going to do 20 minutes of Nancy, and then we're going to have open discussion and hope for good, fun, healthy discussion. So go ahead. So Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. Really, thank you for inviting me to share a different perspective on the proposed merger. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a few slides, and I want to make sure this technology works. So let's see if I can make it work. Can you see my screen?
Yes, good.
Yes.
And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So as I said, I have just a few slides, and I'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then there'll be lots of opportunity, I hope, for questions to me and to each other, and general discussion. I'm turning on my timer too. There we go. So I want to start with really what I think is quite good news. There's really lots of agreement about the goals in this matter. I think we all want to solve the fiscal challenges that are facing the school district, while at the same time we want to try to slow tax rate growth. The fiscal challenges are the direct result of decline in student enrollment that's happening all over, that's been happening all over the state. But it's also the result of the fact that we're working within a public school financing system that was designed really when enrollment was increasing. And so it really wasn't set up to deal well with the situation that we and other school districts are facing. We certainly also share the goal of wanting to expand engaging learning opportunities for students. That was certainly something that was part of my work when I worked with all of the schools in our 5-town area, working with kids, and not some with kids, but mostly with teachers and principals. We're absolutely in sync around our commitment to ensuring equity for kids, to our commitment to maintaining strong school community connections, and to maintain reasonable class sizes. The good news is that we have the same goals, and the tricky news is that we have a real serious disagreement about how to meet those goals. And I mean, I think one way to begin that's helpful to explain the concerns that I and others have about the merger is to explain what the merger would actually mean. If the proposed merger passes on November 8th, the first year of operation of the merger would be the 23-24 school year. That's the next school year after this one. And that first year, you may know, and you may not know, be surprised to know that at the same day that we're going to be voting on whether to merge, we'll be voting on a slate of candidates for the merged board if the merger passes. So the first year of operation of the new board would be that 23-24 year, and that would be a year of planning. The first part of the planning would be really focused on how to merge, what would be the logistics of merging. But first and foremost, what it would mean is that we would have a new school board and our school board and the Addison Northwest School Board would be eventually disbanded. There'd be one 15-member board for 9 towns across 310 square miles, governing ultimately 9 schools. So for starters, I just want to say that our recent experience with consolidation, which the most recent consolidation was 2016, where before that time we had a board for each of our schools. Since that time, we've had one board, and our one board also works under a policy governance structure. And I think many of us feel that since that consolidation, we've experienced less fiscal transparency than we had before, less board oversight of the schools it's supposed to be governing, less communication between the schools and the board, not because of anyone not wanting to have that, but it's just harder with a smaller board and just one board and that many communities. Less authority of the principals for budgeting, for staffing, and for supervision of staff, and more top-down decision-making. And so when we look at this proposed merger, where the governance would be moved farther from the schools, it's just a great concern that the problems we've seen and been experiencing, not through anybody's fault, but because the structure kind of gets in the way of it, it is a big concern. The first part of the planning, the first part of the merger would take place around merging the superintendent's offices of our current district and the Addison Northwest district. The next part of the planning, I would say that, the Merger Study Committee we've often recently heard them say, well, we don't really, this will take lots of time. The new board will have to figure it all out, and it will be up to the new board, and many of the details would have to be decided by the new board. Well, that is true. At the same time, in all of the Merger Study Committee's planning and in the documents that they've sent to the state, the Agency of Education, it's pretty clear, it's really quite clear what the ultimate plan is. And this is what it is, that all 9th through 12th grade students from 9 towns, that is Addison, Ferrisburg, Panton, Waltham, Virgins, Bristol, Moncton, New Haven, and Starksboro, would attend high school in either Bristol or Virgins. And all 6th through 8th grade students would attend middle school in Virgins or Bristol. Notice that this also includes taking all of the 6th graders from their town elementary schools and moving them into a merged middle school in Virgins or Bristol. Another aspect of the merger, which is of great concern, especially has been in the town where I live, but I think it's a concern to many people across the MAUSD towns, is that the Articles of Agreement remove our town's right to vote on school closure after the first 4 years of operation. Many of you know that when we went through the first consolidation in 2016, part of one of the Articles of Agreement was a guarantee that no schools would be closed without a vote of the town. And Starksboro and Lincoln have certainly expressed great concern about losing that right to vote. And I do want to say, it's not that, I don't know, none of us that I know of would say no school should ever be closed. Some schools maybe ought to be closed. And what's really true, I would say, is that we care so much about our kids and about the education of our kids that if we were shown convincing evidence that our school, say in Starksboro, could no longer be financially viable and could no longer meet the needs of kids, I would be the first in line to say, then it's time to close it. But our town really feels strongly, and I think lots of people across the towns feel strongly, that that is our right to make that decision, and it falls on the board to prove that our school would need to close. But until that day, we're not willing to give up the right that was a promise to us when we first consolidated in 2016. For us, it's a matter of democracy. It's a matter of keeping a promise. Another problem with the Articles of Agreement for the new, that the Merger Study Committee put in place in their recommendation, is that it would allow for up to 3 grade levels to be removed from any elementary school without a vote of the town where the school resides, even in the first year of the new merged district. Now, it's not likely the new merged board would do that in the first year, but that's a pretty shocking abdication of authority or seizing of authority. I would also say on that first bullet about the town's right to vote on school closure after the first 4 years, in all fairness, the merger study committee did make it a high bar for that to happen. The new merged board would have to have a 2/3 vote to do it, and then there would need to be a 2/3 vote to close a school of the whole 9-town district. But even with that, in our view, it's the revocation of a right that was a promise to us when we consolidated in the first place. Transportation is certainly also a huge concern in a merger. We're talking now about a situation where 9th through 12th graders are in one town, either Virgins or Bristol, and 6th through 8th graders are in another school in the other town, Virgins or Bristol. The Merger Study Committee has done two transportation studies. We've been asking questions about the details of those studies, and the school district has not given us a response to our questions. We asked them a few weeks ago. And so what we do know is that it's so likely in a merged situation where you're busing kids that kind of distance, that more 6th through 12th grade students would experience bus rides of more than 90 minutes a day. And the most recent study shows that the cost of that transportation, the upper limit is up to $3,272,500 a year. So that's a big concern. And I know a lot of families are very concerned about the length of those bus rides. We're also concerned, I mean, as I said earlier, we're very serious about equity, and we all are, but it's hard to see how equity is served when schools are, when travel time is that distance. I mean, you've got to ask the question, who will have access to after school help, athletics, or other activities? And I mean, really for us, it comes down to, it seems to be in many ways a system that favors families who can afford to personally transport their kids to and from athletics and other activities. Another piece of the plan is that school choice would be offered among elementary schools, but without transportation. So if a family, is interested in choosing an elementary school outside of where they live, that will work as long as they have the means and the time and the resources to transport their kids to that school. So it seems really quite inequitable to us, and that matters. I guess another piece of our concern is that it seems to us like merging is going to make the problem worse, not better. That is, if the problem is that our enrollment is declining, it's hard to imagine why young families would choose to settle in a merged district where their kids would be going to schools potentially for middle school and high school far from where they live, and where their kids would be riding on the bus for big, long lengths of time every day. I mean, it just seems like we might really be losing an opportunity to gain more students in our system, and which would really help solve our financial issues. One of the interesting things about the study that the Merger Study Committee did is that they did some projections about tax rate. And one of the things that was discovered in that, and you can see it in their report to the state board, is that while there might be a financial tax rate advantage to merging for the first few, maybe 3 years, that financial advantage is only temporary. And after 3 years, I mean, in the first 3 years, the merged district tax rate would be less than what it would have been if we hadn't merged. But after the third or fourth year, the financial advantage goes away, and the tax rate for a merged district is higher than it would have been if the district hadn't merged. So that seems counterproductive as well. I guess one of the most important things that I want to say tonight is that there are better and less radical approaches to solving the problems that we're facing as a school district. MAUSD commissioned an excellent study by a terrific consultant, and his job was to suggest and analyze a variety of different approaches to solving the problem. And first of all, his process was really excellent. He involved principals and community members. He worked with the board and a committee of community and staff to figure out what should be the criteria for analyzing the possible strategies for solutions. And it was very well done. It was very thorough. And he came up with a list of strategies that would save our school district over $3 million every year without having to close any schools, move sixth graders out, without having to merge governance, without having to put kids on buses for big, long lengths of time. And really, our board has the option, if we don't merge, to look at those suggestions and to implement them in a staged, gradual way as the consultant recommended. Because one of the things that's true about our situation is there are a lot of moving parts to this, and some of the moving parts are in Montpelier. There are many pieces about the funding system that are in flux. They're talking about changing the funding system to a 100% income-based system. There's a new weighting study that changes the formula used for funding, for figuring out what the per pupil cost is for schools. So there's a lot of moving parts. And the advantage of a flexible staged approach is that you can try some things and see how they work and see what changes in Montpelier before moving on to the next sort of more radical change if it's needed. So, I mean, I think the study that was done by the consultant gave the board a roadmap, and it's a roadmap that will really come in handy if the merger is voted down on November 8th. So, if the voters reject it, the two districts will remain separate unless Montpelier does something crazy, which it might. The two districts could go on, and really they should go on and explore and implement a whole lot of ways to collaborate to save costs and expand opportunities for kids without merging. Our two districts have a history of being able to collaborate together, and there's no reason why, for example, we couldn't offer high school courses taught for both kids in both schools, partly remotely and partly in person. And there is a way to work that out. Is it simple? I mean, is it can you just do it in overnight? No, you have to work out how that's going to work. But it's certainly doable. And there are other school districts that do it. And there's no reason why we can't do it as well. And I think the other piece is that our towns, our 5 towns could and should work together on strategies to increase enrollment in our schools. We really have some opportunities, some things we can do that will create the childcare, the reasonably priced housing, the broadband that would enable us to attract young families to our towns, and that would really alleviate the financial problems we're facing caused by lowering enrollment. So I think I'm done. I think that's what I have. That's what I brought for you tonight. And so if you have any questions for me, I'm welcome to try to field them. There's another member of the group that I've been working with who's in the audience tonight, Herb Olson, and he may be able to help also answer questions. I've put on the screen my email address, and you're welcome to email me anytime, but I also put up the address of a website that will give you more detailed information than I could do in 20 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for that presentation. That was great. Now we're going to go to the open discussion period. And the way it works is just, raise your Zoom hand and I'll just call on you and say, feel free to put out there anything you want, comments, questions. It's a free for all, reactions to what you just saw and whatnot. So is there? Okay, so we're gonna start with Alice, who has raised her hand first. And yeah, anyone who does want to talk, just raise your hand.
Well, I just wanted to. I was curious. I'm sorry about that. Let me just turn this up. I was curious about the less radical approaches. I started reading through them, but then the screen was done. So I wondered if you could just go through those briefly, Nancy.
Sure, Alice. Hi.
Hi.
So let me see. Do you want me to put him back up? Okay. So here are some of the things he recommended. Sister schools. We have a bit of sister schools already in MAUSD, but the consultant believed that we could do a better job of pairing up our schools and coordinating schedules across pairs of schools, especially the 4 smaller schools, in a way that would save money. The weighted student funding and bounded autonomy is about coming up with a formula. And he really is this consultant, his name is Nate Levinson. He's nationally known, just an amazing mind. And he's one of his areas of expertise. He's been a superintendent. One of his areas of expertise is school finance. And he talked about being able to, that it would be possible to come up with a formula that would define what the per pupil budget should be for each of our schools within some bounds, some have-tos. And that's where the bounded autonomy comes in. So that principals would have an amount of money and some parameters, some guardrails, some have-tos, and within that container, they could make many more decisions than they are permitted to make now about how to operate their school and fund their school. And this goes along with the idea of cost-effective budgeting and staffing with school-based decision-making. As I said a little earlier, one of the problems that I think we're facing and have been facing since 2016 is that principals have less authority for budgeting and staffing and supervision of staff than they used to have when we were building budgets, school-based budgets, when each school was its own school district. In that scenario, we certainly still had a superintendent helping principals with the budgeting process and a business manager, but the principals had much more decision-making authority to make decisions because they're much closer to the kids. The consultant talked about the possibility that we could merge superintendent's offices without merging governance. Basically, either through a supervisory union structure where we still have 2 districts, but we'd have 1 superintendency. But or you could do it through job sharing, but a supervisory union governance structure is probably a more realistic way to do it. And he believed that, and he showed how that would save money. Each of these things had a dollar figure of savings attached to it. He certainly talked about collaborative high school classes between the two districts, and I talked about that earlier. And he also thought there was much opportunity for streamlining middle management. And one of the things he talked about quite a bit was the notion that in the context of declining enrollment, we could save quite a bit of money if we had more of our staff, middle management, and principals and others in the system wearing more than one hat. For example, principals can be instructional coaches, and of course, if they're not familiar with that kind of role, they would need training. But the consultant talked about lots of opportunities for streamlining our staffing. The staffing outside of the classroom. Does that answer your question? Okie dokie.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yep.
Krista.
Hi, thanks for hosting this event. Actually, Nancy, would you be willing to put that slide back up again? I just wanted to share a few thoughts. I'm a Bristol resident and I'm a rep to the MAUSD school board. And I have 3 kids who are at Mount Abe now, which is just mind-blowing to me. I have a 7th grader and then twins who are in their junior year. And I just want to share my own personal perspective. Folks may know that the board had a discussion the other night about this, and you know, lots of folks are mixed about whether or not we should merge. And I recognize that it's a really heavy lift and that it's a hard time to be contemplating this. And I think my perspective has shifted as my kids have gone up to Mount Abe from where it was when they were in elementary school. So I also really think that's important to keep in mind, that that where you are as a family really does impact how you feel about these decisions. And so my perspective right now is really focused on middle and high school. And I do support the merger with that in mind. And what I believe is really the focus of the merger is on finding ways to sustain community schools while really making a more robust middle and high school experience. So I agree with Nancy that Nate Levinson's report, for folks that haven't had a chance to read it, is a great report with a lot of really good suggestions. And all the ones listed here are absolutely doable. And I would also just say that many of them are in the works, regardless of whether we merge or not. So our district administration is working right now with him and his team, along with building principals, to build in a more robust sister school program, to have shared decision-making, and to really bring that voice back to building principals so that they are more involved and invested in decisions that are being made. So for me, that's an example of how, even though, so we had sort of a rocky road when we first merged and figuring out how to do this well, I think this is going to get us to a better place with more voice for lots of folks throughout the system. I did want to say that the things that, you know, so Nate did say you could merge superintendent's offices without merging governance, and he acknowledged that this was not something that a lot of folks really loved as far as superintendents. And so I think there's management challenges with that structure. So it's that would also be a heavy lift. And then I guess the other thing I wanted to note is that in these specific strategies, it's these mention ways to save money, but they don't really talk about how to make a more robust middle and high school program. And, you know, right now for me, I have seen the issues with having a combined middle and high school. And I think those issues have been in place for a long time. And with declining enrollment, they're really exacerbated. And so to separate out those two requires a larger system. to be able to have a standalone middle school. And when we talked to staff the other night at one of our board meetings, a lot of folks that work in the middle and high school recognize the benefits of a standalone middle school. And the other thing is that I think that while we could have collaborative classes, we're seeing a lot of families choosing to send their kids to private middle schools like North Branch, or to choose other high schools like CVU or Middlebury, because we, in our current configuration, are really struggling to offer a diversity of programs and give kids lots of choice. And my own kids have had to make decisions based on limits to their programming that in a bigger system, I think we'd have less of that issue. So I just wanted to point out my own perspective and why I recognize this is a really hard lift. I recognize that it's challenging to envision a larger system. And I think it would require a ton of work to ensure that we found ways to keep community voice really vibrant. But in the end, for me, seeing that this declining enrollment is going to continue to impact us, particularly in middle and high school, and seeing what already is missing there, that this seems like a really good option to me. So thank you.
Thanks, Krista. There isn't any other hands raised at the moment. Kevin, I did
Kevin
know
had a hand up before.
Kevin had a hand up for a moment and then he retracted. Do you want to say something, Kevin?
I have some thoughts. I've been kind of back and forth as how to approach this. I guess one thing I'd like to talk about and have a few questions about is transportation. There was quite a bit of a discouragement from Nancy's point of view on transportation. She threw out some numbers. I guess I'd like to get a clarification from her as to what the current cost is for transportation in each district, which simplistically would be combined if there was a merger. What the delta cost would be over and above that if and when the high school and middle school were separated to provide the additional busing for that. And then I guess the other thing is we always talk about the long ride, but there's a lot of kids that are going to be taking a short ride and a medium riders too. So I think there needs to be some perspective stated about how many kids, and obviously geographically you can figure it out real quick. It's going to be Big Hollow and Starksboro and out by the bridge in Addison, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be on a bus for 90 minutes both ways, by the way. That's not one way, that's both ways. So I don't know if Nancy, you want to answer those. I've got some other questions too, but I think some of that stuff needs clarification.
All right, well, we go to Nancy.
I'm so glad you asked those questions, Kevin. It turns out that we've been asking the MAUSD superintendent those questions for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he hasn't provided answers for us. We asked him for details about what the districts are paying now and how the additional cost would be split among the 2 districts. I know that's a decision that would need to be made, but we asked him for his best estimate of what the additional cost would be to each of the districts, and he didn't give us that answer, nor did he tell us what the current cost is, although we ferreted that out a little bit. We asked him they've modeled transportation 3 different ways, and we asked for each of those 3 ways of modeling it, what would be the changes to the start and end times for elementary, middle, and high school, and he did not provide that information, although it must be readily available. We asked him, what is the percent of kids now, 7 through 12, and also in 6th grade, who have bus rides over 45 minutes one way? And for each of the three options modeled, what percent of the student body would have bus rides over 45 minutes one way, that is 90 minutes a day. And he didn't answer that question either. So if I can't answer your questions, it's not because we haven't been asking.
So I'll just offer that the 3.2, whatever it is that you put up on your slide, is the combined cost of transportation today. If you look at the transportation study, the current cost or base cost or whatever it is, the column header is a little bit confusing. But that cost is what the cost is today for transportation. Looking at the various options that DSG or MSG or whatever their name is has come across, the range has been 350 to 950,000 additional dollars and there's a wide variance because there's a wide variance of ride times that they have been discussing. So obviously, the shorter the ride time, the higher the delta dollar cost is going to be. So I think some of that stuff is misrepresented, Nancy.
Well, currently the two districts use 29 buses. This is just for regular transportation, not extra athletic transportation or anything else. One of the models to bus the kids in a merged district, there were three models. One of those went from the current 29 buses to 39. One of them went to 45 buses, and one of them went to 55 buses. And the cost, went up incrementally according to how they did that. And then the consultant also said he had some big doubts about whether it would be possible to find the drivers to drive that many buses in this area.
Well, that would be in today's economy, but realistically, we look at that scenario probably several years out if we separate those schools, because as it stands, without separating the middle and high school, you would pretty much stay with the same routes that you've got today.
Well, as I said, we've been asking for detail and have not received it. Herb has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Herb, you've been waiting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. My original question in some of Kevin's comments is, we've been asking for, because I think parents will notice, okay, my mom is spending X amount of time on the bus now. What are they going to spend in a merged district? And it's got, notwithstanding, some, slipping and sliding, the proposal is to merge the middle school and high school. Okay, and so it's going to be higher. It's going to be long. And we've asked them to tell parents and students what the data is, and they have absolutely refused. Just incredible. This identity, you would think they would want to be transparent with the voters and the residents. I want to add something else about the issue of equity, and Nancy said it very well, but I want to say it a little more pointedly. There are some areas, so if we're talking about busing students to Virgins for middle school, which frankly, what people are talking about, they say, oh, we're not going to plan for this, we don't have a plan. But that's what they've been talking about for years. So there might be similar issues over in Addison Northwest, but I'm familiar with the north corner of Addison, and we have students in the northeast corner of Starksboro and the southeast corner of Lincoln and frankly, I think the southeast corner of Bristol, who are going to be real far away from Virgins as a middle school. And this really makes a difference. Do you want to get parents engaged? I mean, the secret is getting parents and students really engaged in their learning, right? And you're putting this huge distance involved. This is really bad for equity. And the people, the kids and parents in those, I don't want to generalize, but there are a lot of low-income folks over there, and they are going to be hugely disadvantaged if we merged. And the final, some statistic, as far as I can tell, the merge study committee is saying we're going to save 4.2 million. As Nancy said, 3.3 of that can be savings can be achieved with merging. Then you got to think about the extra expense from transportation. They're trying to buy routes by paying more money. So if you paying up to I think it's 3.7 million, maybe it's 3.3 million. I could be wrong, but you're paying extra money on transportation. You got to net that against the proposed claim cost savings. So the idea that you got to save money in order to increase educational opportunities, I totally agree with. But let's do it. And let's not add additional costs and put schools and parents further apart from each other with the merger. I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but thanks a lot.
Thanks, Herb. Next in line is Karen, and then Daniel.
Hi there. This is so important to be talking about. And Nancy, thank you for that very well laid out presentation. That was really good, really sound information. Hard to know exactly where to start other than the last two points. One having to do with, we're talking about transportation, but it's really about fiscal transparency, getting information that we need and desire and want as voters, taxpayers, as the folks that are funding all of this, and how difficult that has been, how obscure, how occasionally you even have to do a public records request when that's the last thing you should have to be doing. And even then you don't get the information you need. So there's the fiscal transparency issue, which is a serious problem at this time in this smaller governance structure, and will only, be exponentially a problem as it gets expanded into, 5 more towns. The other point that, I appreciate Krista shared her perspective. I do feel that the board writ large over the last, 3 years, 4 years, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent at these meetings, at State Board of Education meetings, at legislative meetings, at subcommittee meetings, there's so many meetings. There's so much material. I have boxes and boxes now. It is fundamentally, as far as I can see, the governance structure itself, pre-K through 12, that is the problem. It's the elephant in the room. Yes, from the very beginning, when we finally did get a glimmer of the information when there was the proposal to close 3 schools without a vote early on, you could see the mechanism. There is a need to improve educational offerings, to consolidate financial resources for the benefit of the middle school child and secondary school child. That's necessary. And separating out a middle school is very beneficial to this town or these 5 towns, because it has been not through any fault of any professional or goodwill, but it has been some downtime for students educationally, and they deserve and require a robust middle school experience. But the funding mechanism is happening on the backs of the elementary school child. These are children for whom revenue is dedicated. It's intended to be spent on those children. They might have special needs. They might have an enhanced, weighted value on their heads, but that money gets all mixed up in this fungible fund, misdirected, I think, at times into, as was being suggested a minute ago, non-educational purposes, or purposes where, high quality classroom teachers, well, those positions as a policy matter go unfilled, creating a budget surplus, but then gets converted into money that can spend on a facility. And it is true, our 5 towns voted down a bond 3 times. We could vote in a good one. We could vote in one that we agree with, but we hadn't. And so the empty positions, they could be special ed, they could be teachers, they get converted into improving the building. And that is not what this community, these 5 towns are directing and what they desire. And when we merge, if we merge, the 5 towns will lose their right to vote on school closure. School closure is now defined as the majority of classrooms. So, do the 6th graders, which are doing well in these small community schools, those kids are thriving. So they get slipped into a system that so far hasn't served the kids in an optimal way. And then then is it the 3, 4, and 5 class that can leave? And that's not a school closure. So the sense of what we voted on when we said we have a right to vote on school closure is being radically changed by the articles of the merger. The merger committee can change those articles anytime they want. They have not said, oh, well, we cannot possibly change our articles for 4 years and possibly close a school. It's taking away voted rights that we 5 towns, Moncton, Starksboro, New Haven, Bristol, and Lincoln, all voted on when we decided to merge. There are things that are not working about this merger that will be amplified and not working about a bigger merger. How can you possibly have 13 people really looking out for pre-K through 12th effectively when you have a governance structure of a unified union school district? That's what it is. And so what it does is it takes away accountability and a chance to have a responsive have a response from the administrative entity. So if you, for example, there's many ways you could go with this, and those suggestions that Nancy pulled out for Nate Levinson are really worth considering. But if you bifurcated the elementary school into its own school district and a school board that had that revenue, looked out for that student population, and most effectively implemented and delivered education in an equitable way to those kids, that would be a powerful group. That would be important. And then you could have a middle school or a high school separate, school board as well. But to have 13 people doing pre-K through 12, they can't possibly do that job. And so to have 15 people do it for 10 towns is you can see where it's going. I feel like we need to get a lot more decisions right here first, and doing these incremental, really positive, really useful changes certainly seems preferred to doing a merger. And I did go to a lot of those merger meetings. I saw thoughtful people on that board. They could not get their point across. They could not be heard. And I just think we owe it to all of our students, to our 5-town community, to get this right. Now, I'm in Lincoln. I'm not allowed to vote on this because even though all of our money and all of our students are going to the school district, we're being denied that vote. And I do feel like the governance structure removes the paying citizen, the voter, the taxpayer from these really important decisions. And I think we should keep assets that are in the community that are doing well and thriving. And that would be Robinson School, that would be Lincoln School, and not have to be subject to closure if it's not the right decision. And when you lose your voice, you can't ever participate in that decision. And I've rambled and I'm sorry about that, but I do see severe problems with the existing structure. And I think it is the governance structure itself that needs to be reexamined. And a supervisory union structure, I believe, is more accountable, more responsive, and gets it right much more readily. And so anyways, I don't think the merger is a good idea, but I don't get to vote on it.
Thank you, Karen. We're on to Daniel. And Daniel, you're on mute. There you go.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Lyons. I am a Bristol resident. And I want to start by saying, like, I believe in small community schools for sure. I have, for the most part, benefited from smallish, community-ish schools my whole life, and my kids are currently, as they are both at Mount Abe. Both my kids have walked to school since 3rd grade. I get to know the community. I don't have to go on and on about why I feel small schools are the way to go, and small local community schools are the way to go. I also work in education, so I understand some of the nuances beyond just, being a parent of a child who's attending our school in our district. However, I feel like we are all fighting for the same thing. And there's this elephant in the room, that there's not enough money to get this same thing. And that's a real problem. And that problem is going to come and hit pretty soon. And there's a lot of people who are on this meeting and who are in our town and on our board and who are serving on these committees who are doing an extraordinary amount of work trying to figure out this problem. And the one thing that's really not working is, like, we all want to keep our schools. We all want to sustain education as it is, as the board had said, as Patrick had said. However, there's not enough money to do it. And so something has got to change. And so I appreciate the work that the board has done. I appreciate the work that Patrick has done. I appreciate the work that all of these committees have done. They are thankless jobs and they take a lot of energy and a lot of time. And you guys have all come up with, like, many very good ideas. But the board and Patrick, I hear them when they say that they want to sustain elementary schools as they are currently providing education. They want to create robust middle and high schools. I hear them when they're saying that they're putting the elements or some of those suggestions of the Levinson report into action currently, even before a vote goes out. So I trust that they are doing the best that they can given the circumstances. And I fear that, they have the best route forward right now with this merger. And hopefully it would be temporary, and hopefully we wouldn't have to change school or education as it looks drastically. And if it does change even a little bit, maybe it can go back as that magical money just starts to appear in our town somehow. But if this merger doesn't go through, I understand that there are ramifications for the 2023 and 2024 budget coming up next year. And I'm curious what that looks like. Like, are there cuts? What does administration look like? What do classes look like? What is the real picture? And that's something that we're not really talking about yet today. So ultimately, I mean, I'd love that if anybody has the answer to that question, like what happens in July 1 when a merger doesn't go through to our budget and our staffing for next year. But I want to end by saying I do thank everybody who has been working on whatever side of the coin that you're on, like all the energy that you're putting into this. I appreciate this. I do think it's time that we let the board, like, we merge and we do what we need to do to provide the education that we need to provide. And then we all fight like hell to bring it up to the state that, help them realize that this is a bigger issue than just these small counties that are losing their smaller schools. Like, this is something that Vermont as a state and our legislature really need to get a handle on. And it goes way beyond education. This is a microcosm of a bigger picture where things are an issue with our healthcare, obviously with climate, with education. There's not enough money to do the work that we need to do. And so education is just bearing the brunt of it, and as is our district right here. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Daniel. Karen is next.
Daniel, thank you for those thoughts. This is the Mount A board is a board that does not have a finance committee, even though it is the largest collective resource of our 5 towns. And it's one of the most important, and maybe the most important thing we do as a collective community. Those careful, attentive sets of eyes on the finances are important. I've looked at the budgets very carefully over the last 3 or 4 years. And how should I say this? First of all, there is this notion that there isn't enough money is a little bit of a not correct description. So if you take the resources that are dedicated for the community elementary schools, there are resources. There are sufficient resources. If you take that money from those elementary school kids and you put it into the middle school and the high school, you get a little more offerings at that level. So I'm just saying, there is money, and it's more that the governance structure doesn't really allow us as a community, as voters, as members of the community, to have those dollars spent in a way that is I don't know, optimal for all the students' education. And it allows for other kinds of spending. And there's no true oversight or way to have to get that information accurately. Back when we had the separate school districts and sets of eyes really looking out for different interests, there was much more accountability and much more fiscal leanness, actually, and in certain areas. And it was a structure that worked pretty well. So what we're doing is we're amplifying a structure that's problematic. And I feel like we could get it right. But until we get this better, to expand that same governance model is problematic.
Thank you. I just want to put out there, raise your hand if you want to talk, and I would like to hear from as many voices as possible. So I will prioritize someone who hasn't spoken. We can have people multiple talking, but I will prioritize people who haven't talked yet over people who have. So with those priorities, I think Liz would be next.
I just wanted to say that a really great way to get some information about what next year will look like, the superintendent's office is building 3 budgets right now, the contingency budgets and the budget for what the different scenarios could be that could happen. And so I look forward to seeing that myself, Daniel, and that's when we would really get many more of the details about what it will look like next year. That's when they can do that. And I've always felt that even though we don't have a financial committee, that we've had a lot of access to as much and more information than I could even, than I would even be able to spend the time on. So if we have specific questions, they always get answered. And the budget is done in a really great way that connects. Each section is kind of highlighted into the goals of the district. So it's really nicely organized, and I definitely encourage everybody to take a look at that. And our office received very high compliments from the consultant, Nate Levinson, and his team for having one of the best grasps on the educational finance that they've ever worked with, for a team they've ever worked with. So I feel very confident in the work that they do.
Thanks, Liz. Again, I want to encourage any new voices, but I think next we'll go to Nancy.
Thanks, Mark. Daniel, I'm right with you around, we need to really be talking to Montpelier to get Montpelier seriously thinking about how to support not just the suburban schools in our state, but the rural schools as well, so that we don't have to suburbanize our rural school system. The other thing I just want to say is that you expressed the idea that we should try a merger, and if the money comes in, or if we get an influx of student enrollment, we could go back to the way we are. And I just want to say that if a merger does happen, it's going to be very, very difficult to go back.
Thank you, Nancy. Raise your hand if you know from any want to encourage new voices again, and let's go to Herb.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise an issue that's come up pretty recently. The whether it's the merger study committee or is the school district recently sent out a bunch of flyers, two-sided advocates advocating, you know, to support the merger. And I've personally had a bunch of emails from folks saying, how is this possible? How can a public entity supported by tax dollars be paying for flyers which have to cost a bunch? I mean, it looks like they were sent to everybody in both MAUSD and Addison Northwest, bunch of money, and how could this be? And you know, the norm used to be that whether it's a select board or school board, you know, they would not advocate for a particular position. And it seems to me that that's been reached here, and that we're spending taxpayer dollars to advocate for a particular position. I think people are really going to resent that. And I don't think it's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Herb. And we're on to Sally.
It seems to me that this whole proposal is based on decreasing enrollment in the schools. And I wondered if any thought has been given to what happens, what are the ramifications if enrollment picks up, either slowly or quickly. I had the same situation decades ago with my children when the town we moved to, specifically because of the good schools, closed the school, and my children had to be bused to another local school. So from a 10-minute ride, it went to 40 minutes. There were times when they missed the bus, or just I took pity on them and I drove them. That means that there's a bus spewing fumes from fossil fuels and a car, and I know I wasn't the only one doing that. I personally know right now of 3 families with children who have moved locally, not specifically to the school district, but they've moved from out of state for climate or political reasons. One family was very harassed, Native American family from Buffalo, New York. There's a family from Colorado, family from Portland, Oregon. They face climate disasters, and they're looking at Vermont, which has been confirmed to me by a mortgage lender at a Middlebury bank who said that about 90% of the mortgages that the loans she wrote this summer were to out-of-state people. So it's possible that enrollment will pick up again. In our situation, in our family, I don't remember the exact number of years, but it was around 8 to 10 years the school district suddenly had a lot more students and they had to reopen the schools. So that's my question. Has anyone thought about that? Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Sally. And we're on to Christine. Christine, you're on mute.
Oops. What are the ramifications if we vote the merger down?
Okay. Good question. Sally, your hand is still up. You might want to bring that down. Now we're on to Dave or Pat.
Thank you. So I'm no longer in the legislature. I do continue to keep my ear to the ground, so to speak, and I think that whoever said it, the high spending threshold is likely to be refigured, and so a lot of concern and estimating done around the current high spending threshold is questionable. I think that the implications of the going forward with Act 173 about special education is up in the air, and if and when it does go forward, it will benefit our Mount Abe district. And there is a study committee that's looking at going to strictly income basis for paying for schools. So it concerns me that the diagram on page 29 of the merger document, of course, just shows the penny rate, which 2/3 of our residents do not pay according to the penny rate, but rather by income. Nevertheless, that's what's displayed, is what's going to happen with the penny rate. I would like some answers with regard to FY23 shows the merged district significantly less, 12 cents on the penny rate less in taxes in the merged district. I don't believe there's any incentives from the state for merging. The rest of the merger document seems to say that FY23 is, going forward educationally as FY22. There'll still be the middle and high school at Mount Abe and the middle and high school at Virgins. There'll still be all the elementary schools operating. So I don't see on the face of it how there's a 12-cent savings on the penny rate in the Mount Abe district on FY23. And I do note that by FY26, the merge rate is roughly equal to the, no, it exceeds the Mount Abe district. It's roughly equal to the Virgins district. And by FY27, it's significantly more than the Mount Abe district would be in the event of no merger. So answers to those questions, it appears by this graph as if whatever savings are had by merger go away by FY26. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We're on to Herb.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and I'm sorry for coming in a lot here, but obviously this is something that's pretty important to me. I want to follow up on something that Dave said. I'm not sure exactly what's on page 29, but I think it is a PDF showing of tax projections that was presented by the Merger Study Committee. And here's an interesting thing. back on September, I think it was the 8th, I asked the Merger Study Committee and the MAUSD for the spreadsheet version of that. And what that would help us out with would be answering some of the questions that Dave asked, was wondering about, and that I have about, exactly what sort of savings and tax impacts really are there. And I'm skeptical about that because over the summer, the Mount Abe district said, well, if Starksboro withdraws, it's going to be a 17% tax increase. This was false. So I wanted to know, and they have consistently refused to give that information. They have refused to give a spreadsheet on the tax projections that they are talking about. And, I don't trust them for that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We're on to Krista.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that for me, I wish we weren't having to consider this. I for sure don't want to see kids having longer bus rides. I for sure would love it if we could have a middle school and a high school in Mount Abe. And for me, it's less about savings. It's more about opportunity. And I think that's what I want and a lot of parents want. I don't want the status quo because in my experience with kids who are marginalized, they're not getting everything they should be getting. And so I want to expand on what they can get. And I don't think there's any easy way to do it. And the money needs to come from somewhere. And we also need people. And I think about healthcare and universal healthcare. And that's creating a really big system out of a very personal, individualized decision. But I think a lot of us support that because we recognize the overall benefits for the larger good. And so for me, this is about that. And like with healthcare, I would want to make sure there were really strong opportunities for citizen voice in a universal healthcare system. And I would equally encourage folks, join the board, be part of that voice, come to board meetings, come to community engagement meetings. That's so important. But I think that to see, 6 kids in an a cappella group, because those are the only kids we have, or to see not able to go to a soccer game because of the bus, we can't get a bus driver, or to see that Starksboro can't find a way for a student with a disability to get to the bottom floor of their building unless they travel in a way different from everyone else. That's not acceptable to me. And to have robust opportunities for all of our kids means that we might have to be within a bigger system. And I haven't found another way that we could do it. And so I just wanted to say it's less about pennies and dollars. It's more about the bigger picture for me.
Are you on mute? Yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, Dave, you're not on mute. Thank you, Krista. Okay, we're going to go to Alice and Tasha, and then we'll get to you, Liz.
Do you want to take Tasha first? Because she hasn't asked anything yet.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Tasha. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to Krista and to the school board who've been working tirelessly. I see you and I see how hard you're all working. And it must be really frustrating to have so many people come in at this point in the game and have big questions. And I hear your argument about the more vibrant programming, the more opportunities for language and band and school plays. My biggest question is about small town voice and why in 4 years we lose that. Like what is that? Can you explain to me why that's written in there? If that wasn't written in there, I might be able to get on board, but that just seems like such a throw out of all of the small town power that I'm not ready to do that. So I'm just curious what that's about.
Thanks, Tasha. Okay, why don't we go to Liz and then Alice? Does that work? Sure. Okay. Liz?
I just wanted a short answer, and I definitely encourage the same questions to be asked next week so that you can get longer and more thorough. I just want to be brief here. But there would be plenty of capacity in all of the schools if our population was to increase. At one point in time, there were 497 students at Bristol Elementary School in my 6th grade year. So there's lots of capacity. If we just started growing, we've got the room. And the simplest way to put that, what would be the consequence of not voting for the merger if the merger gets voted down? And I think it's important to remember, no matter what happens, our students will be okay because we, as their community, will wrap around them and take care of them. But what that would mean is that the savings that we are going to find, they're going to be found in our district alone. And that puts, in my opinion, a lot more burden on the elementary schools so I think that's the simplest way to say it, is that it wouldn't be able to be found, for instance, possibly in a merged middle high school. It would have to be found here within us the way that we are. So that would put more financial pressure. I'm not, Dave, sure about the first year of the 12 cents being down, other than if maybe it has to do something with the hold harmless. For the last couple of years, our decrease in student enrollment hasn't been counted against our district. The state kind of just held it as a hold harmless. At some point that they probably will pay per the pupils that we actually have. So even though we have lost some students, they're not funding us any differently. So I don't know if that might have something to do with it. And then for the few years down the road where it looks like we would no longer be having any savings from merging versus being as we are now, I think that's what I would say. That's probably more just comparing what the tax rate would be a few years down the road to what it is now, right? Not what our tax rate would be if we didn't merge a few years down the road. It's comparing then to now. And the chart, there's still a decline in the students projected, a smaller one, more stable at the elementary school, but there was a sharp decline over the last few years, maybe decade. And that decline is working its way up to the middle high school, and the middle high schoolers get funded more per pupil, especially the high schoolers, because there's supposed to be a breadth of programming. And so when the decline works its way up there, there'll be a significant funding change for us. So I think that is part of why that looks that way a few years down the road, is unless there is a big change in our student population, these are challenges that have to be worked through for as long as there is declining enrollment. And it's just a question of whether we do it in a smaller bubble or a bigger bubble. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. We are running down on time. And of course, don't forget, there are forums next week where everyone can keep going at this. This is really good. So Alice and Kevin, I know you both have your hands up. So I'm going to get to you both, but I would ask you, since we are running towards the end of things here, if you could be concise. All right, go ahead, Alice.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks to everybody here who's been involved with this issue, which sometimes people on Front Porch Forum, I've noticed saying, this is a pretty clear issue. And to me, it's an incredibly complex issue. And I get more confused. I get more confused the more I hear. I don't get clearer. I certainly don't get clearer that there's a very, very clear reason for why we're merging. I think it seems like money and education are kind of merged together, and I still don't have a lot of clarity. I had helped raise a couple of young men who went through the system some years ago, and both Middlebury and Mount Abe, and that was before it merged. And I think things since before the consolidation, I'm getting confused between the two, but when we consolidated, which I was concerned about, things became more impersonal, and it became a much more difficult job for board members who are phenomenal people. I mean, Krista you've taken just hours upon hours to talk to individuals, to be out there while raising a family. It just seems like things have gotten more complex. Things happen, like we get this huge walkway, all these complex walkways built in Starksboro and Bristol, and nobody really knows where the money came from or why we're doing that and not the playground. And what was the other bill? And I'm not really sure where the money came from for the renovation of the high school, since we never voted for it. It just seems like things are happening that lack the clarity that it did before, when we had particular people that had things that they were, schools that they were focused on, and that they were the board members and the principals and people were more engaged in the whole functioning of how each individual entity went and how they fit together. It just seems like things have gotten more complicated. And I'm concerned that actually there's going to be more waste of money if we get into yet a larger system. We're going to be voting on a huge budget. It just seems, I don't see any clarity, and I absolutely will be attending the other meeting, but I'm very concerned that things are getting fuzzier, more complicated, and we as the public and the voters have less of a grip on it. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
We're really close on time. We've got like about a minute left. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So we are running out of time here, Kevin. You've had your hands up, so if you could just be brief, but go ahead.
Okay, I just want to recap a few things. Going back to Herb Olson stated a $4.2 million cost reduction. That is the cost reduction independent of all the elementary school initiatives that Levinson identified. So that 4.2 is the cost savings that would be moving the sixth grade into a middle school, establishing a combined high school with Virgins, and going to one central office. And that's about 63% of Levinson's cost savings. So if we choose to set that off the table from a financial point of view, we're giving up a lot of opportunity for cost savings. And Krista was absolutely right that the thing we're trying to do is provide a stable environment for high school kids. We hear a lot of talk about, well, when my kids went through, and when our daughters went through, for that matter, it was a lot different. It was a lot different because today, both Mount Abe and Virgins put together is the equivalent size of Mount Abe alone in 2005 for the junior and high. So there is a need to get the two high schools together, to get the two districts together, so that we can have a student population that we can teach affordably and give them the instruction that they so deserve. I think.
Oops. You're off.
Evan, you just muted yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I got muted. But anyway, the other misnomer I think I heard tonight is we're going to grow the district. This area, as well as the state of Vermont, is in the midst of a housing crisis, where housing is at a premium and vacancies are at an all-time low. So to think that families are going to move in and resupply a school district that you can fold two districts into, that was from an operation in 2005, will require a lot of structural change in how we have buildings in our towns to support that increase in population. It just isn't going to happen.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everyone. I think this is such a complicated issue. It's really nice to hear civil discourse from all sides and such like that. So thank you, everyone, for
Linda,
who
did you
spoke.
want to speak one
I
last
just
thing?
wanted to do a
Say some
closing.
feelings, Linda. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark, for moderating. That was wonderful. And thank Nancy, and thank you all for coming. Thanks for Neat TV. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the merger committee is having their first forum this coming Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mount Abe, and I think it's by Zoom as well. And again on Wednesday for Jen's, it's another hybrid, and then an informational session on November 1st. So we still have opportunities to learn more. I think that we have to be sure that everyone understands that they have to actually get this ballot. They have to go to the town clerk. I did today, go to the town clerk and ask for it to be sent, or you can go on November 8th to vote. But I think we got to tell all our neighbors and friends to vote, and that it didn't come automatically. And some people say, oh, it didn't come with the other ballot. And I said, no, this is every local community has its own local issues. And so also on that ballot, I just want to tell you that they also have, if the merger goes through, you also elect your board for the merger board, which I thought was interesting. They said, yeah, if the merger goes down, the board members, you don't have the board members. So that was interesting. And also they're going to be voting on a bond for a water line through Pine Street, and I'm on Pine Street. So those are the issues that they'll be voting on, but they must get that ballot. So I want to thank everybody for coming. And I think that's it.